This is The Queen's Court, a special mini-series from the Wonderland Beyond the Looking Glass podcast, where we've always focused on relationship building, healing, and mental health. This mini-series is no different, but the need is great. The series is for the 92%. The series is for everyday people carrying the weight of what they're seeing on the television and in every breaking news story. So yeah, the revolution will not be televised, but it's happening right here, right now, one voice at a time. Because Wonderland is burning down. They told me to smile pretty for the picture, but I got. Hey everybody, welcome back. We are now in we're over a third way through. We're in our fourth episode today. Today it's going to be a really, really interesting topic, a topic that probably many people have heard, have experienced. I'm even going through a process with it myself. So definitely going to be something that we all could learn from and kind of connect to. Nicole's going to be flying this plane here, so I'm about to hand over the mic and let's go ahead and get started. How you doing, everyone?
Hello. Doing well. I actually wanted to check in with my fellow queens here, and I wanted to see how is your heart before we get too deep. How's your heart? I would like to tap in with you all. Where are you at? How you feeling?
Well, hello everyone. This is Keisha. I'm at this moment I'm feeling relaxed. This has been a very busy week, very, very busy. Uh, a lot of tests and testing of faith, testing of patience, among other things. But I will say the way my week is ending is much better than the way it began.
That's outstanding. I think for me, I have a somewhat feel better for this country at the moment because the government's been opened back up. Um, but I still know people who have not gotten paid yet, even though the government's opened back up. So it's still trickling in, but at least I guess with some steps in that right direction. Um, Other than that, I am ready to rest. I am off for a few days coming up, and I'm going to definitely rest. I will be going to a Bulldogs game tomorrow, though, and that makes me happy. And I'm gonna look like a crazy person. I'm gonna have the black under my eyes and everything because I don't know. I think I can play football. So other than that, yeah. Anything anything I could do to jump
Uh,
the attention off of me.
well, please just don't run on the field, but
No,
do all the fun stuff.
I'll
I'm
stay off
messing
the
with you.
field. I'll be famous though
And
if
you're
I did.
forced and I to claim you. Like, oh, she has the eye black on.
I
Okay.
know, right?
Have a bandana on. I'll have my shirt on.
Don't
Be serious.
get bumped into by law enforcement either.
No,
There.
look, when I
Oh,
saw that, I got so mad. I got so
I
mad.
know, right?
Ooh, that could be a whole podcast on itself.
I know.
On itself.
I was glad we got that on. They got it on film. It was like
Right.
Absolutely.
there's plenty of experiences like that that aren't caught on film. So I was pleasantly surprised that that one was caught
Absolutely.
and addressed.
Hmm. Quickly, very quick.
Right, right.
Hmm.
Um, so I today we are going to talk about grief. As you all know, but I guess I should share that I have a background in emotional intelligence, and that is my purpose. So I felt led from many different angles to speak about grief, considering where we are in our current climate, in our individual lives, and beyond. So, given that piece, I wanted our listeners to know that when we hear the word grief, the automatic thought that comes to mind is death. It's usually, grieving a particular person. But grief is so much more than that. It's really what grief really is about loss. And so a lot of times we are dealing with loss of identity, loss of stability, loss of relationships, loss of dreams, loss of the person that we used to be, loss of desires or like relationships that we thought thought we were in that reality tells us it's not. So there's many forms of grief, and so I would like to explore that within this discussion. So before we get too far deep into it, when you all, Keisha and Michelle, hear the word grief, what comes to mind for you all?
For me, it's loss. I connect grief with loss, whether it's the death of a person, death of a relationship, death of a job, loss of a job, friendship, which connects with relationship. So I connect it with loss.
I would say loss too, but then exhaustion. And I think for me, it's just really tiring. Um, and for me, maybe for different reasons, because there's a internal fight when I have to deal with grief to push it down, push it down, push it down, and that's tiring. You cry, and crying only gives you a headache or makes you tired. Like it's just freaking tiring. Um, and then trying to figure out what new life is beyond whatever that event is. What's life to the left of that event? What is that going to look like? Um, and I do have maladaptive behaviors that I've developed over time where I need a checklist. I need something I can control because I couldn't control that.
Absolutely makes sense. And then also, many of us are carrying grief that we never even name, right? Like we don't realize it until it comes up in a sometimes deemed by society an inappropriate manner, meaning like an emotional reaction to something that was minimal. And then it's, got the negative attention. But a lot of our behaviors, maladaptive or otherwise, are unnamed grief. And so I think emotional intelligence helps people to recognize that, to put a name to it so they can start to process it. And that's why I think it's so valuable to at least name our feelings so we can look a little bit further to into be more self-reflective with our behavior. So we, as we just shared, we are not just grieving people, right? We're grieving versions of ourselves. We're grieving seasons that ended too soon. We're grieving expectations that might have fell apart, and identities that no longer fit. So again, this is another question for you all. What form of grief do you think most people overlook the most? Like, obviously, death is the more socially acceptable, but are there any other forms of grief that people tend to overlook?
I would say, I don't know if they overlook this, but I think sometimes the way people go about dealing with it, coping with it, is grief of a relationship. Some people feel like, oh, I'm going to move on. Oh, we broke up. I'm going to get my hair done, my nails done. I'm going to get back out here. I'm going to keep going. And then what happens is, yeah, you might meet somebody else, but it doesn't take away the fact that you still have to grieve. That happens. I know for me personally, when I went through my divorce, I had that mindset like, oh yeah, life goes on. I'm running my business. I got this happening. I got that happening. I'm going to move on, and I did move on, but it was like a hurricane. It just came like whoosh, and I found myself grieving, like something had already, events that already took place like over a year ago, where I tried to avoid it by staying busy, by doing XYZ, and it hit me. So I think that's definitely something. Sometimes people they try to avoid it and then it catches up with you. But the thing about it is when it catches you, you don't know the time of the day. You don't know where you're going to be at. You don't even know what that's going to look like. And so that's something that I dealt with personally. Yeah.
And kind of just to piggyback off what you said, one of my supervisors, my bosses, mentors, love that lady. Um, she told me one day, this was after the murder of my friend, and she said, "Are you sure you're going to be able to?" There was a training about gun violence that was coming up, and she was like, "Are you sure you're going to be able to handle it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course. Why not?" And now we know why, because I can't remember nothing. But anyway, and honestly, when I think about it, though, and I'm not telling people that this is a good thing, but in the element of me not remembering stuff due to grief and everything, I've been able to get really far in my career. Not saying it's healthy, but at least it wasn't some. I'm minimizing right now. Let me go back to the question. So I would also say what she told me was grief, like you said, Keisha, it's kind of like a jack in the box. And you're just cranking and cranking, and you never know when it's gonna pop up. But when it pops up, it typically is going to startle you. It's going to, you're going to step back. It's not something that's expected. And I know for me too, just to answer your question, Nicole, grieving people who are grieving something that's not gone. So I know grieving somebody who is passed, and this kind of ties into what you said too, Keisha, but grieving somebody that's passed, you can really go out of sight, out of mind. But when you have to grieve somebody who's still here, that's rough
That is rough.
because you can't run from that. I mean, you can
Well,
try.
when you're grieving somebody that's still here, you're also not only grieving that person or the version of the person that you thought they were, but then you're also grieving the relationship that you thought. So it's like multiple levels of grieving, and the person is still a real live ghost. So you could see him and you could touch him, but I'm grieving you all at the same time. So yeah, very good point. In the current, what we have right now in the collective, there are a few different levels of grief going on also. Like we have the political tension, the economic pressure, social unrest, burnout, fear, constant change, like all of these things. And I feel like people are overwhelmed with the multiple layers of grief collectively and then with our own personal bubble of grief that we're going through. And so I feel like in general, um, they feel the grief as overwhelm and not necessarily as grief, right? And so I feel like that piece sometimes gets missed, um, to not put the words to the experience or to the feeling. So a lot of times, because we are overwhelmed and it is grief, it tends to show up in our behavior as anger or anxiety or as numbness or, as Michelle stated, distraction, right? And it does tend to drive those behaviors in excess, and sometimes it can, present as successful, right? So the assumption is I'm successful, but as you shared earlier, you truly are maladaptive, right, to the grief. And so, do either one of you can answer this? Do you feel that people today are more emotionally overwhelmed now in this current time versus which one are they more overwhelmed? A few years ago or currently now?
I think it depends on the person. And while you were talking, an example of grieving came up that I can almost guarantee people are going to be like, well, I never thought of it like that. So, um, if you have listened to us, you know I'm military connected, come from a military family, legacy level military family. If this is your first time hearing, then I just told you. But myself, my parents, my grandparents, my great great grandparents, just all the way down the line. Um, and that meant something. It still means something, right? But when I saw what happened on January 6th, when the Capitol was stormed, and I knew if it were people who looked like me, it would not have the same outcome. I cried. I grieved because I was living in a country that I signed my name to defend to death, till death, don't want me here. That's some heavy stuff to carry. People that I have signed my name on the dotted line, and my parents and my grandparents, and stood up and said, I'm willing to die to make sure you're safe, do not want me here. And you can think, you can see that, and you know that, and it's like history, this, that, and the other. But when you see it so much white privilege in your face like that, I grieved a country that I swore to protect because it's not who I put my name on the dotted line for. It's not the same place for me. So that was an example. I was like, you know what? That's a grieving experience that you wouldn't think that it would be if you're not sitting in it, but grieving a place that you call home, and it's really not, you know? Um, so yeah, I think it depends on the person.
That was so powerful. I hope people take a minute to actually reflect on that level of grief. Um, to take that kind of is a good segue into what I want to talk about next because I feel like collectively I just shared the different levels of grief that we're all experiencing, and we might not have awareness of that. And so, what I would like to talk about is how grief lives in the body. Um, and so, grief, just in general, it can be minimized as just an emotion, right? And it's not an emotion because it can physically show up in our bodies, right? Physically, meaning in our chest, in our shoulders, as exhaustion or irritability or brain fog. And we have learned through science and through studies that our body remembers what our mind is trying to forget, right? So a lot of times we are not physically feeling right, blaming it on whatever ailment, and usually trying to find some solution to that, whether it be medicating or alcohol or any other way that we choose to cope with physical ailments. And so when we are dealing with grief and not recognizing it as grief, we can be tending to the wrong wound, if that makes sense. And so when I think about what Michelle just shared, I'm I know because I have talked to others that have shared the same painful recollection, as far as their commitment to something that is not appearing as it is or is not, what it was. I can only imagine what their physical is like now, on top of the wounds that they might have gotten through their military experience. So, do either one of you know how grief shows up in your body?
Well, I not just for me per se, but in working with others, can describe it like indigestion. It's that feeling where I've slept for 8 hours, watching comedy. I'm trying to do some self care, but in the inside, I'm still not feel. I feel a heaviness. I feel uncomfortable, and it's not a form of discomfort because of food. Is the heaviness of the grief and excuse me. I've watched others and even myself when I've had that release from something that I've been grieving over a matter, even if it's not a person, a situation, it's a relief. It's like like something just lift off of your whole body. It's almost like you can hear better, you can see better, you can breathe. It doesn't feel like something sitting on your chest. Um, so that's how I relate it to. I relate it to indigestion, pretty much. I I think for people, a lot of times when they carry that grief, a lot of times it can end to early death, especially if you see a couple where the husband may have died first or the wife may have died first. Um, I have a dear friend who passed away during COVID when it was during 2019 when the first round of COVID came out, and her husband literally said at her funeral that you beat me to the gate, but I'm right behind you. And he hadn't been the same since she passed away, but maybe about a year and a half, he passed away as well. So people sometimes is it can be unbearable to the body, to the mind. Um, some people are carrying grief and they don't even know that that's what's wrong. They've been going back and forth to the doctor, they've been talking to people, they're trying medicines and some everything else, and they don't know it's just a matter of the grief. And sometimes a speaker, he's actually a pastor that I follow, Darius Daniels, he talked about sometimes when people are grieving, it's a matter of just the apology, just accepting and just getting what you need on your own without waiting on somebody to give you that to get past that grief. So accepting an apology from somebody else, because you know the apology is for us. So that's another form of how sometimes it can impact the body, but definitely impact the mind too. And when you don't get past your grief, it can impact your future, it can impact your future relationships, your future endeavor. I think I went a little over your question, but
No, no, I
yes.
appreciate the engagement. I appreciate your insight. Um, well, then I'll ask Michelle the next one. And I ask you, and I also challenge our listeners to kind of look deeper. And this is why I'm putting this question out to help others reflect on their own signs, symptoms, whatever. And we have had this discussion, and so this is why I want our listeners to listen to Michelle's response because she's very in tune. And I want us all to reflect also. But Michelle, what is either a sign or signs that your body gives you when your spirit is tired?
I'm living every sign of that right now. I would say for me, sleep does not bring you rest. When I'm sleeping and I'm still tired and I'm still exhausted because it's not physical exhaustion. Um, I think most of my signs will probably end up sounding like depression, though. Like I don't want to be around anybody. I don't even want to be around myself, but I can't remove myself from myself. Um, because when it gets too quiet, that's when all of the thoughts and everything come up. So it's like, okay, you always need to have it noisy. I have to sleep with noise. There's my schedule is so packed because when stuff stops moving, I'm left with what's internal. And you can't sleep that off because when you wake up, it's still there. So I guess some people turn to drugs and alcohol. I turn to sleep. I love sleep. Sleep makes me very happy, but I still wake up tired.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
that's a thing. That's definitely a real thing to sleep, get all this rest, and you're still tired. Yeah.
So, being the sunshiny person that I am, I cannot allow this podcast to continue because it feels heavy, right? And so I would like to kind of pivot a bit because it is my belief that grief is a teacher. So if we can change our perspective on grief, because there's a lot of times when we all want to know the why. right? Why is it so heavy? Why does it feel so dark? Why do I not want to process it? If we can change the perspective to look at grief like a teacher, and a lot of times it feels like society has taught us that any emotion is a weakness, much less grief. We hear a lot of times like, oh, get over it, like those sort of minimizing statements that people use when they don't know how to support somebody that is grieving, right? And so when we look at grief, we realize that this is heavy, but grief opens you up to empathy, right? A lot of times when I am dealing with clients or dealing with people that are so harsh and their delivery harsh and their thoughts so harsh, it kind of tells me they have not either processed heavy things or haven't gone through heavy things. And if you notice, like what you thought grief was when you were 15 is much different than what grief is when you are 40, right? And that is because you have had major experiences with grief. Therefore, that has increased your empathy, right? Your empathy because, I know what it feels like to be in a place of losing a really good friend. So I am empathetic to those who have experienced loss. I have been through certain things and I'm more empathetic towards that. So if we can look at the things that we're grieving as it's teaching us empathy and display that with and for others, we can have more compassion and self-awareness and support for others, right? Instead of looking from a place of judgment, we can look and address certain things from a place of compassion and empathy. And as I've shared in multiple podcasts, I truly believe that if we as a collective had more empathy and compassion, we would not be where we are currently today. So, um, the grief process, it not only grows empathy, but then it also strengthens our boundaries to where we can have better discernment of putting ourselves in certain situations, right? So we have more boundaries after this grief experience that are protective of ourselves. And then for me, having grief stripped away what was not real. So, like relationships that in my mind thought they were, my grief process and processing it helped me to realize, oh, that wasn't real. The perception that I had of that person was not real. The relationship that I had with that person was not real. That friendship that I thought was real and I'm grieving, it wasn't, right? So now I transition to a much more aware place through my process of grief. And so that's what I want us all to come to some understanding and some awareness that I know grief seems yucky and it is hard, but there are some positive things that can transition from the process of or processing of grief. And so I wanted to ask you all, um, have you all come to any conclusions of what grief has taught you?
Well, grief has taught me that I'm human, that my feelings are valid, that it's taught me also how to let go. For some situations, it's been a little easier than for others. It also taught me that it is possible to displace your feelings, anger, this, that. I mean, with the whole grieving process can be a cycle. Um, it's taught me to allow myself to feel, allow myself to cry, allow myself to reminisce, allow myself to walk away, let go. Um, yeah, it also taught me how to be aware when I'm being warned about certain situations, people, or whatever, to take heed to the warning so that I don't have to revisit this. I don't have to go down this road again with this particular situation or with a person. So it taught me to be mindful and to be aware as well.
I think for me, it's taught me no one's promised tomorrow. Absolutely no one. And it probably lends to the reason why I'm so bent on not wasting time. Like, keep it moving. Let's not dilly dally and all the things because you could be here today and you could be gone tomorrow. And I think for me, out of everything, what Keisha said, absolutely. But for me, it's you literally, we could be having this conversation today and not be here tomorrow, not be here in an hour. So make sure to be intentional with what you do in life, who you're around in life, um, and make sure you're living the life that if that day comes, when that day comes, that whatever legacy you're leaving behind is one that you want to be remembered by.
So good. Thank you for sharing. Both of you, I agree with the same sentiment. Um, when people are going through a grief or grieving process, a lot of times people feel like they need to fix it, right? And I have a different perspective. I feel like people that are grieving don't need to be fixed. They need presence. And I feel like a lot of people don't know how to provide that for people, right? Because I don't know how to fix that. I don't know how to fix that. They don't need fixing, they need presence. If we can learn how to give presence, I think we can learn to support one another and make it socially acceptable to be grieving, but then also to provide the support, right? So we need to bring awareness to how do we do that? What does that look like? You know what I mean? Being present with somebody versus judgmental or attempting to fix it. Because the grief process, and as we all have discovered, is a very individualized process. Even though we all have been through it, and it's easy to say, "Oh, this is what worked for me." What worked for me doesn't always work for the next person, and we need to have compassion when that person is going through grief. Allow them the space to learn their own process because they need to learn their own process to be the expert in their own process, right? So let's provide presence to those that are experiencing grief. And then also, I wanted to share that empathy is not a weakness. When I talk so much about empathy, I hear so much like people making fun of it. And it, to me, is a superpower. If you have empathy for somebody, you have the ability to truly see them. And that is the support that I feel like our collective is needing, the ability to see one another, to be present with one another, to acknowledge one another, and be okay in that spaces. We have done so much damage from places of judgment. Like we've already done that. We've figured out that that doesn't work. So we definitely need more empathy. And so if we can change the perspective that empathy is not weakness, compassion is not codependency, because I've heard that a lot too. I don't want them to be codependent on me. That's not why I'm providing support. And then holding space for me is emotional courage, right? Like it's not I'm taking on your wound, but I'm here to witness you, to experience your own grief process, right? So if we can own it as emotional courage, I will have the emotional courage to provide presence with this person that is experiencing grief. I think that would be powerful in healing our collective. So I wanted to share that. And then I also wanted to go over, let me just check my notes because I'm a nerd like that. Um, I wanted to ask both of you all, what is one thing that you all wish that people would understand about grief?
It's not an overnight fix. There's not a time frame. I know sometimes people may feel that, you know, even for themselves or for someone else, gosh, you should be over that by now. You should have been already moved on by that, from this situation. So it's not like a timer, all it depends on the person, it depends on the situation, um, depends on how emotionally involved they are with the person or the situation too. There's many dynamics to it. So just allow yourself to at least begin the process. Don't try to avoid it. So those would be some tips that I would want to share with others.
Well, my therapist said that's my thing now. My therapist said, well, two things. One, for me, um, you might have you might think you are beyond the point, right? Um, God bless her having to be my therapist because I swear I think I know every damn thing. So for her to have to deal with me in the I already know about the grief cycle. What do you mean? I already know. I already know all the things. I already did the bargaining. I already did the madness. Blah, blah, blah. She was like, you haven't accepted. What do you mean? Yes, I have. I know my mom's dead. And then the bomb that was dropped, not literally for NSA and anybody else who might be listening, the information that was provided to me that shocked me. She said, you have acknowledged that she's gone. You have not accepted it. And with that one statement, everything got crystal clear because I haven't. I'm mad. I'm mad. And I bounce between mad and sad because I haven't accepted it. Because how, you know, and you're not supposed to question God in the whole thing. But guess what? It's part of my process because I need to know why. And knowing that you'll never get that answer. It's a murky, muddy place to be. And for me, it is scary because I, the feeling element of who I am, when I get too dark and too deep, I don't feel. And that was my indicator that I needed to get back in therapy because I wasn't feeling anything. So for people who think they might have gotten over it, ask yourself, have you accepted it or are you just acknowledge it? There's a difference. And until it was brought to my attention that way, I merged all those together. Like, obviously, I had to accept it. I ain't got no other choice. Actually, you do. You do have a choice. And if you choose not to accept it, then you're stuck. You're stuck in the process and you got to get to the other side. I mean, you could live your life like that. I know for me, it's not allowing me to be the best parent, best friend, best sister, best colleague, coworker I could be because I'm fighting myself. So you have to look at things for what it is, um, and be honest about what it is, and stop hiding behind the I'm okays when you're not, because it will catch up with you.
So true and so powerful. So in closing, I wanted to share that I believe that grief is not the enemy, it's the alchemist. And if we can change our perspective on that, I think we would be more open to processing. I believe that grief transforms us from who we were to who we're becoming. When I was going through my own grief process, who I am today, I could not imagine. And if it took a grief process for this becoming this person, um, that seemed to be my path. So for me, and I hope for others that they can lean into it being an alchemist. And then to everybody else listening, please give yourself permission to name what hurts, to honor like what's shifting, what was and what is becoming. Acknowledge those two different things, and then trust whatever is falling away is creating a space for what's meant to rise or what's meant to be. So I know it's always scary letting go of things in general. But that's where we lean into our faith and trust that whatever in the letting go, we are letting go so other things can either become or come in. So I just would like to encourage everybody to allow the grief process and not to run from it.
Thank
Yeah.
you,
So that,
Nicole and
Yeah.
Keisha. That was good. That was good. Hopefully, a lot of individuals will take some nuggets out and allow it to be speaking points for your space and your places, or just for yourself.
Mhm.
Um, we're all in this together. And newsflash, no one's gonna make it out alive. I know. I'm sorry. Dark.
Michelle,
I mean, if anybody knows, I do. Okay. Um, dark humor for the win. What I will say
just gonna
is,
stop
at
it.
least I'm feeling right now. That's a good thing. Um, we.
Don't make me go back to the doctor and get everything checked just because you said that. I'll
Oh
just
Lord, I'm saying. I am saying for my friends, and family and our watchers and listeners rather who are in Charlotte, North Carolina, um, be careful. Everybody be careful. But right now the Charlotte's Web is fierce. Amongst some other of the bigger cities like Chicago and Portland where, ice is icing. But ice doesn't do good in the South. So that's all I'll say with that. And don't leave your house without your ID. And everybody stay safe out there.